I speak to you in the name of the one holy and living God. How are we to respond to Jesus' willingness to lay down his life that we all may be one? How are we to respond to a leader who doesn't run away or throw us under the bus when all hell breaks loose and the world erupts into utter chaos? I believe the answer is simple. Simple, not easy. We must do everything we possibly can to affirm our unity with all people. So what does that actually mean? I believe doing everything we possibly can begins with remembering who and whose we are. We understand that we are created in the image and likeness of God, and not only us, but all people, all of creation. And that we are given free will to choose to love, to choose to create, to reason, and to choose to live in harmony with all of creation and with God. This is who we are. So like the Good Shepherd in today's gospel text, we have the power to lay down our lives by our own accord. In other words, we are free to care for the good of one another. Well, doing everything we possibly can also means we respond to God's call, or Jesus' call, that we all be one by respecting the dignity of every human being and loving our neighbors as ourselves. Well, we've heard those words before. We've said those words countless times. But what does it mean? It means erasing the red lines and moving the fences that falsely separate us. It means doing whatever it takes to ensure the assumptions and the actions that deny the shared humanity of George Floyd and Derek Chauvin are dismantled. Think about that. Now here, I have to confess, I did not celebrate when I heard the news of Mr. Chauvin's conviction. I didn't celebrate because one man is dead, another man's life is destroyed, two families are utterly devastated, and our country is divided over who is the trespasser and who the trespassed. What is there to celebrate? Yes, holding a man or a woman to account for their actions is imperative. And it is not enough. It is not enough to allay the fear of fathers giving their black sons the talk about how to protect themselves when confronted by white authority. It is not enough to quiet the fear of mothers teaching their white daughters how to walk in parking lots and other places so as not to be pegged as vulnerable or victims. Holding a man to account for his behavior is necessary and not sufficient to transform the consciousness of people who experience one another as threats. Secular law holds us accountable for wrongful social behavior. It judges us up close or personally, blow by blow, all of our actions and their consequences. And secular law responds with equivalent retaliation, tit for tat, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Well, by contrast, God's law assumes 100,000 feet above the ground perspective. It disarms every appearance of division, to declare our shared humanity, God's law. In the words of the parable of the Good Shepherd, so that there will be one flock, one shepherd. We are one people. And God's law demands a reckoning for Mr. Floyd's killing and Mr. Chauvin's conviction. And this has nothing to do with counting coup or political advantage. God's law requires nothing less than the transformation of our individual and collective consciousness so that we see ourselves, all people, as one people, one God. We are not enemies. When we set aside our pride, our politics, our opinions, we're then free to rise to the God's eye point of view. And from that 100,000 feet above the ground perspective, you've all seen those beautiful images from space. From God's eye view, we are one flock, one shepherd, on one beautiful, incredible planet. And so with our minds risen to the heights of our hearts, we can choose to use our free will, to use our freedom to love, and to live in harmony with all of creation and with God. This is the transformation of consciousness that God's law demands as a reckoning for Mr. Floyd's killing and Mr. Chauvin's conviction. It's up to every single one of us. You know, at least several times in each year, we gather and reaffirm our baptismal vow to seek and serve Christ in all people. Well, here's the thing. All actually means all. No one is excluded from all. All people, regardless of color, or age, or wealth, or lack thereof, or education, or vocation, or even egregious behavior, all people are worthy of care. And we are meant to rise to the 100,000 feet above the ground perspective, to affirm the unity of all people, and to demand that all people are worthy of care. Now, I need to be really clear here. I am not talking about paternalistic care or charity, handouts. I am talking about seeing past the shape-shifting shroud of human behaviors to the core of inherent goodness in every single human being. I mean, how can we be anything other than fundamentally good, very good, when each and every one of us is a spark of divinity revealing itself in our particular profile? Look around. Where is God? Here is God, everywhere. We've allowed ourselves to be duped. We've bought into vulgar lies. We've been blinded by politicians and pundits politicizing people's pain and driving wedges between us. And why do they do that? Not for the good of the people, but for their power gain. We know this. We know this. And it must stop. We must say no. No to the shaming and blaming. No to the dividing and inflaming. No more. We must raise our minds to the heights of our hearts and see and affirm the goodness of our shared humanity. Returning to the gospel according to John, we hear the final prayer on Jesus' lips before his unjustifiable murder. And Jesus prays that they all may be one. Dear people of God, This is the heart and soul of our story. We are one people of one God, given the will and shown the way to lay down our lives for the good of one another. We must do everything we possibly can to answer Jesus' prayer. Amen.